Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another altcoin analysis video. You know I couldn't do this series without paying our respects to the Big Daddy himself, Vitalik Buterin, blessed be his gains, and his project Ethereum. So, this is the Ethereum video, this is the Ethereum review. Most people know what Ethereum is by now. If you're even just a small dabbler of crypto, you generally have a pretty good idea of what Ethereum is, what their progress looks like, what their development looks like, what their goals are. And most people have made their mind up on if this is a good or a bad investment for them, if they hold any kind of Ethereum, if they are bullish on blockchain in general. Usually you can tell if they are bullish on blockchain just by asking them how much Ethereum they hold, or if they are even fundamentally bullish on Ethereum, because Ethereum makes up such a large part of the crypto market share. I think it makes up something like 10% of it as of this video. It has been a lot higher before, and just because of that, because there's so many projects built on it, because it is such a large infrastructure and there's so much developer mindshare on it, you can generally decide just by asking the question of if you are bullish on Ethereum or not, if people are bullish on crypto. So we're going to do an Ethereum video. There are a few things I wanted to mention for people who perhaps do know what Ethereum is but don't know maybe all of the facts. So we're going to go through this, and then we're going to decide if this is actually a good investment or not at the end of it. So let's go forward here. So a little bit of the history of Ethereum. It was launched in 2015 by our Lord, blessed be thy gains, Vitalik Buterin. Obviously, Vitalik Buterin, an incredibly intelligent individual. I don't think he actually had much of a CV, much of a resume before he built Ethereum. It was just... I remember reading an article. It was about Vitalik. I believe he actually wrote news. He was a journalist, and he did a lot of Bitcoin pieces, and he was trying to develop on Bitcoin as well, but there was a huge schism in the community that had to do with the amount of data you could put inside of a Bitcoin smart contract, because Bitcoin does actually have smart contract capability with its op headers and all of that, but Vitalik saw that shift causing that mayhem in the community and decided, well, if this is going to happen, if all of this infighting is going to be taking place, then it makes sense for me to do my own thing. So, little known fact about that. So Vitalik made his own thing, called it Ethereum, and he launched it. It was I believe it was the largest successful ICO at its time. They raised $15 million in 2015, which was seen as an insane amount of money back then, because there were not many projects that really had that much money behind them. And to see Ethereum do that ICO, I believe their ICO was uncapped, so there was no cap to it, and which meant that anyone could get involved, and so they did, and so this is what we have now. We can do a little bit of a comparison. Obviously, the crypto market was so much smaller back then, but people saw the value that Ethereum was representing, so they put in 15 million, quite a lot of money back then. I suppose the biggest comparison you could make is something like Tezos, what Tezos ended up being, where they had only mentioned they only needed something like 20 million, and they raised 10 times that amount of money. So with Ethereum, it was much the same case, where they had an uncapped sale and they ended up getting a lot more money than they ever needed. And obviously the market cap of Ethereum has absolutely ballooned since then. And if you actually can find and meet someone who did buy into the Ethereum ICO, it's pretty rare, because even though it was the largest ICO for its time, not many people were even involved in crypto back then. And so it's quite a rare thing to be able to actually know and speak to someone who was involved with the Ethereum ICO. So they raised 15 million. Then they started the development on it. The Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, so this is really important, the EEA, this was announced in 2017, I believe around the first half of 2017. And this is basically a cooperation, a collaboration between some of the largest companies in the world, Fortune 500 companies, a lot of them. And essentially, all of these companies have decided to collaborate together and work together to build on top of Ethereum. And so I've written some of these companies here: Deloitte, BNY Mellon, ING, Toyota, Cornell University. You've heard of many of these names. And this really, there really were two phases of Ethereum's life cycle, I would say. The first was pre-EEA, and then there was the post-EEA. Now, after the EEA was announced in 2017, that really was the biggest news, the biggest bullish news, not only for Ethereum, but also for crypto, because there was not much legitimacy given to crypto until this announcement. Once this announcement came out, I believe Ethereum was trading at something like maybe $1 or two, or just a few dollars, and the EEA was announced, and it was really earth-shattering news at the time, but it obviously wasn't priced in for a long time before people really understood what it meant. And so as time went on, obviously we started ballooning to insane prices. And even after this huge altcoin bear market, we see that Ethereum is trading at a little bit south of $200. So quite a long ways away from its heydays back in that ICO. So EEA, extremely important. And then now we have Ethereum 2.0, which is going to be the scheduled update for Ethereum, which is, the prognostication is that it's going to be coming out in the early half, around January 2020. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because we're never really too sure when it comes to Ethereum. So that's the general basic history of Ethereum. It's really all you need to know. They had an ICO, 15 million, EEA was announced. It brought a lot of legitimacy to crypto. And now we're looking at Ethereum 2.0, looking at ways that we can scale beyond the cripplingly low levels of TPS that's afflicting Ethereum. So here's our price chart. This is the price chart of Ethereum. Again, orange line is Bitcoin pair, green line is USD, and this is basically from when it started trading from ICO, and we can see that it's been pretty much completely bearish, obviously, in the last year. But before that, it was on a massive run. The prices ballooned, absolutely ballooned. At the very height of Ethereum's, let's say, supremacy or their dominance, they were trading at about $1,400, $1,400 for a single Ethereum. And I believe the ICO per Ethereum was something like 10 or 15 cents. Or something around that. You will have to fact check me on that, but you can go on ICO drops and check the Ethereum ROI since then, and then you can calculate what $1,400 means. So obviously a lot of people who bought Ethereum during the ICO, there's no way they would have held till $1,400. You would have sold at $50 or $100 or $1,000 even. Like at some point you would have realized like, okay, these gains ain't normal. You would have sold, but again, a pretty huge run. A lot of people saw a lot of value in Ethereum, and largely this was due to the ICO hype and ICO speculation, in addition to the general crypto bull run, in addition to the pricing in of the EEA news, in addition to all of the development that was happening on Ethereum and all of that hype. So there were a lot of reasons to be purchasing Ethereum back then. Obviously, that has since died down since the altcoin bear market and crypto bear market, and so we've been having. It's just been a lot of weeks and a lot of months and even a year now of just negative price action, negative sentiment in the community, negative feelings towards Ethereum. And I would say that is generally the sentiment now currently of Ethereum, especially when you look at technical traders. All of the technical traders, or technical indicators and technical analysis of Ethereum in particular is going to be extremely bearish. It's hard to find anyone who's really an Ethereum bull. In addition, we also have things like the Ethereum derivatives that are trading on BitMEX. Since those came out, I do actually kind of have a bone to pick with Arthur because he released the Ethereum derivatives, and then he released an article on BitMEX saying that Ethereum was a 2-digit shitcoin, and then Ethereum dropped from something like $500 or $400 all the way down to $86, I think was the low. And I certainly do call manipulation on that. I definitely call I wouldn't say insider trading, but it was obviously something that was done with intent. But bygones are bygones in this case. That's all in the past now. Ethereum does still have derivatives that are traded on BitMEX. You can trade them on BitMEX, and you don't actually touch any of the Ethereum supply. So I made a video on this previously that talked a little bit about futures contracts and why they were unhealthy for Bitcoin. And so if there's future contracts that are traded on Bitcoin, obviously none of the buy side is hitting the actual supply of Bitcoin. Likewise for the BitMEX derivatives. If you are buying a lot of Ethereum on there, if you're going long, you are actually not doing anything with the Ethereum supply. You're not causing any kind of buy pressure, because the way that BitMEX works is it's only with Bitcoin. All of the trades are funded through and by Bitcoin. And so that's another bearish thing that has led to a large part of Ethereum losing a big amount of its market share. And especially the Bitcoin pair is really telling. You can really see that even compared to Bitcoin, it's just completely tanking. It's not doing very well at all. And so what we are always looking for is signs of life. But again, technical traders will technically trade. And so you're going to find it very hard to find these days people who are buying Ethereum on a technical level, and even more difficult to find people purchasing it on a fundamental level due to all of the lack of hype and speculation. So enough of the price chart there. We'll talk about the features. So what are the features of Ethereum? You should know most of these. You can develop dApps on them, distributed applications. It's a permissionless ledger, so if you know a little bit of Solidity, which is like JavaScript, you can go ahead and develop your own distributed app, and then you can release it on the Ethereum net, and you can just tell your friends about it, and they can start using it, and they can start having fun or doing whatever, using your service, whatever it is that you have designed on Ethereum. That's one of the great things about it. If you are a developer from somewhere in Asia, let's say, it doesn't matter if you're geofenced or whatever, you can't really geofence a blockchain. And that's the great aspect of Ethereum, is it gives you all of these tool sets, or it gives you this giant tool set that lets you build whatever you want. No matter who you are, where you are, it doesn't matter. It's permissionless, so you can do it. As long as you know a little bit of Solidity, you can do it. The ERC20 standard, it makes it easy to mint new tokens. So ERC20, again, a large reason why we had this huge run up in 2017 was because Ethereum made the minting of new tokens very, very easy. Before Ethereum, a lot of people had to do, what we had to do was fork different coins, which obviously was a lot more intensive than something like an ERC20. After Ethereum, what we had was, it was a very simplified and easy process to create and mint a new token. So ERC20 standards revolutionized what it meant to create a token, what it meant to create an ICO. And even ICOs on Ethereum became that much easier compared to doing an ICO on, say, Bitcoin and then releasing tokens on a different net. It was just all a lot more difficult, and it was made a lot more easy by the fact that this ERC20 standard existed. So again, still a thing that exists now, very easy to mint tokens. It's a fat protocol. So what does that mean? Is that on Ethereum, all of the things that run on Ethereum, all of the smart contracts, all of the applications use Ethereum as its base ledger, use Ethereum as its base token, use Ethereum as the gas with which to power all of these smart contracts. So what does that mean? That means that the more popular your smart contract gets, if it's built on Ethereum, Ethereum's going to raise in price and appreciate in value, because it requires a lot of Ethereum to run these smart contracts and pay for the gas. So as you get more developers and more apps, obviously the protocol gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is an infrastructure project that, again, provides a base layer for people to work on. And because of that, it gains a little bit of value from every single application that's built upon it. So that's a great point for Ethereum. And another thing about Ethereum, it's proof of work, and I had another notification there. So it's proof of work, and it's planned to have proof of stake. So in the next update for Ethereum 2.0, we are going to be moving to proof of stake, which means that there's no longer going to be, let's say, Ethereum ASICs and all that we have on the market now. It's going to be it's going to be all proof of stake. It's a lot more efficient, energy efficient. It's a lot greener, and I'll talk a little bit more on the proof of stake in a further slide, but that's generally what it is so far. And the last feature, which is not really a feature, but it's not really a bug either, it's just kind of sad, is the fact that it is 14 transactions per second. It is really, really slow compared to pretty much any third generation blockchain today. So 14 TPS. Hate it or love it. There it is. It's twice as fast as Bitcoin, I guess. So there you have it. Positives. So we'll talk some of the positives of Ethereum. They have the most developer mindshare out of all the smart contract infrastructure. So this is really, really, really important. This, to me, is actually more important than anything else. If you have the most developers on your project, you are always going to have the upper hand in terms of developing those applications, in terms of building solutions, in terms of finding the ingenuity and the creativity that's required to make something that is truly interesting and fun and interactive and compelling. And that's really where I always look for the value. I don't really care so much about a project having a lot of money, although Ethereum certainly has a lot of money. But what I care more about is the developers on it. If you have a lot of developers, then that is really where you're going to get all of the solutions. If you get these solutions and apps, then you're going to get customers and you're going to get users. And if you get users, then you're talking real market adoption. And so I believe personally, or I can tell you, it's not a belief, Ethereum does have the most developer mind shares, and I believe that because of that, they're going to be the ones who are able to profit the most off of crypto getting larger as an ecosystem. So amazing positive for Ethereum. Pretty much the only one really that they need. Solidity documentation and tooling is plentiful. So if you're a developer, you are going to have the easiest time to develop on Ethereum compared to any other smart contract platform. And that's because they do have this Solidity that has been built on for years now, since 2015. It is based on JavaScript. Everybody knows JavaScript. The tooling is plentiful. So in terms of libraries for building smart contracts, there's so many of them already that you can really, it's almost an incumbent competitor in the space now, to where if you want to build something and you're talking to a developer, you don't even really need to mention that you're building it on Ethereum. They probably already know that we're going to build this thing on Ethereum. And so most developers kind of take that for granted. And that's really a testament to the amount of, again, tooling and Solidity documentation that there is, because it does really make it so much easier. And this can't be understated. If you're not a developer, this might not seem like it's particularly important, but for developers, you know how much time you save and how much easier it is when you have your own libraries and you don't have to go basically creating every single thing from scratch, and you can use things that other people have used. These are really, really important. So the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance ensures the most corporate attention will be paid to Ethereum. Again, I think the EEA is now over 100 companies, so that's quite a lot. And a lot of these companies, again, I mentioned a few, Deloitte, Toyota, like these guys are huge. They're not just some nobody company you've never heard of. These are real companies that are looking for real solutions, that are actually going to be building real things. And so you compare that to any other infrastructure. I think really VeChain is the only one that has anything similar. So VeChain has a Walmart partnership, which is amazing, but that's really the only one. Ethereum has partnerships with, again, over 100 different companies that are on that level of Walmart tier. So you can imagine how bullish that makes me personally as an investor. Ethereum grants for developers provide additional incentives. So this is like Tezos, like the other projects, where they have a lot of money, they have a big war chest. Ethereum, again, right now they're trading at $20 billion market cap, pretty large, the second or third largest coin by market cap. That's for a reason. That's due to the success of Ethereum. And that means that the Ethereum Foundation has a lot of Ethereum, and that means that they can use that to provide incentives. They have a huge, huge war chest. How much do they have? Hard to say. But you can be pretty sure they have probably at least $1 billion or $2 billion there just waiting to be used for granting incentives and doing developer grants and things like that, which is amazing. And you can already see some of their grants. You can go on Google and search for the Ethereum grants, and you can see that they're actually working on some pretty interesting things. And the final positive behind Ethereum is it has the most history behind it. So everybody knows Ethereum has been tested. It works. Yes, there has been exploits and bugs on it, like the parity hack, DAO hack, and all of these things, but these problems have now been fixed. So we can say now that Ethereum has, for the most part, been tested. Now there is always, everything can be exploited, right? And when it comes to something like a Turing complete smart contract platform like Ethereum, yes, there's always going to be things like exploits that exist on it. But if I had to put my money on anything, I would rather put it on Ethereum because it's had so much history behind it compared to a newer blockchain that maybe promises something better in terms of a tech offering, but it might not be able to have the security that I'm looking for that Ethereum does provide. Next slide. So negatives. There's a lot of Ethereum negatives. So I'm not an Ethereum moon boy. The largest market cap of all infrastructure projects. So all of the smart contract platforms, you put them all together, Ethereum is the biggest one. It is the largest. And this is on one hand, it's a positive, as I mentioned in the previous slides, but now it's also a negative because we're investors. Are you looking to put your money in something and just have it grow a little bit? Or are you putting your money in something and hoping that it grows a lot? That really depends upon you, upon your appetite for risk, upon your appetite for your understanding of the tech and these kind of things. But I would look at this as a negative for your average crypto investor who's looking to spend. Maybe you want to put $500 or $1,000 on some crypto, and you're not the kind of guy who's going to go all in, but you want to have a little bit of exposure, so you put in a little bit. That $1,000, what if it grows to $3,000 in 2 years? Like, great, you made $2,000 in 2 years. Like, you're not making anything. Really, what you're looking for is you want to take a little bit and get that 10x, get that 100x, make a lot of money doing that. And so for your average crypto investor, Ethereum, because it's the largest market cap, it means it's going to be the slowest moving. It's going to be the hardest to really outperform because of all of the other people looking to sell on the market. The consistently delayed updates give leverage to competitors. This has been an ongoing problem with Ethereum since I have been in crypto. Since I've been involved, Ethereum is always delaying projects, always delaying releases, always delaying the timing of things, always delaying announcements. This is pretty much the way of crypto, and Ethereum is leading the pack here because they're always delaying something. And it is a little bit of a shame, but it is what it is. And what that means is as Ethereum says, okay, well, we're going to give ourselves 6 more months before Ethereum 2.0, that means we're giving ourselves 6 more months, but we're also giving all of the other competitors an extra 6 months to make a better offering than us, to get to that market adoption before us, and all of that. So again, every time there's a little delay, it's almost like a little blessing for all of the other competitors. Proof of stake is an untested migration. Proof of stake obviously has a lot less history behind it compared to something like proof of work. We know proof of work works. We know how it functions. We know it's basically unexploitable. We understand the maths behind why proof of work is so pivotal and vital. Proof of stake, on the other hand, you basically have a blockchain with no proof of work behind any of the tokens. There's no representational value of the tokens. Whereas if I own a Bitcoin, I know that there was a lot of mathematical work involved in producing that Bitcoin and a certain electricity cost. With Ethereum, if it's proof of stake, right now it's proof of work, so you can make the same argument. But once they move to proof of stake, it's a lot harder to make that intrinsic argument of what is the actual transactional value of this one Ethereum? What was created or what was invested to produce this Ethereum token? So that is more of an economic / philosophical / fundamental question that I'm not going to get into in this video, but it is certainly something that I would say is untested in general. It's an untested thing. Proof of stake, not nearly as secure, I would say, as proof of work. So the ICO, here we go. The slowest TPS. So it is the slowest TPS. I talked about this earlier. It's 14 TPS. It is a Generation 2 blockchain. This was built in 2015. This is now 4 years ago, going on 5 years old blockchain technology. The things that Ethereum was built on and built for back then obviously was not intended for the amount of market saturation, the amount of market cap, the amount of investors and players in the space now. And we can obviously see that with projects like CryptoKitties grinding the damn thing to a halt. We can see with all the exploits that come out every few months, it feels like there's a new Ethereum exploit. And that's really just because Ethereum, Vitalik even said it himself, this is not technology that we expect to be ready for the next 5 to 10 years. We need to really work on this and get it perfect. And it's going to have problems and it's going to be a bumpy road. But hopefully we can get this to a workable state before all of the market adoption comes. Unfortunately, Vitalik and the smart people at Ethereum didn't really forecast it, and they had no idea that we would have all of this market adoption so quickly. So again, slowest TPS, Generation 2 blockchain. Pretty much any other Ethereum competitor you look at on the market today is at least 5 to 10 times faster. So the ICO mania has faded from Ethereum. Obviously, 2017 was an amazing time for Ethereum for all of the reasons I stated earlier, but it also means that there's moving into 2019, because there's no real new ICOs, and the few ICOs are taking place on other platforms, and there's so many other options now if you want to do an ICO, it means that there's less reason for people to be buying Ethereum tokens. There's less reason for people to be holding on to these things. And there's less financial incentive to do so. Because maybe if you're holding an Ethereum at $100 and you expect the bull run to continue, well, you want to hold on to those Ethereum so you can get a better rate on an ICO, on a market peg. So those things are all basically gone from Ethereum right now. There's really no ICOs happening. There's a few, but most of the ICOs, honestly, that I've personally seen, that I've even been taking a part in terms of private sales and pre-sales and things like that, in 2019, they've been a lot less Ethereum based. They've been a lot more based on things like stable coins, people raising stable coins, people raising Bitcoin even. People have been going back to that. People raising through other forms. And so it means that there's a lot of less buy pressure on Ethereum. Finally, BNB, Binance, is taking a crack at it. I know CZ says to people that he's not competing with Ethereum, but he obviously is. BEP2 on the Binance DEX and the Binance chain, that whole thing, they're obviously competing with Ethereum. It's going to be a smart contract platform. They do not yet have smart contracts, but they plan on making it, enabling it for the chain. And so obviously we have Binance here, which is the biggest altcoin exchange in this space. The largest, I think it's the largest company. Maybe BitMEX is larger, and Bitfinex. But they're one of the largest companies in the space, and they are furiously, I would say, attacking Ethereum. First, again, with the functionality of Binance DEX and the ability for you to do an IEO there. And secondly, with the Binance Launchpad idea, where you can do your ICO, but instead of doing it on Ethereum, you do it on Binance, and you raise in BNB, and you bring all of those network effects that was putting all of that, that was constricting all of that supply in Ethereum, and you're putting it on Binance. And while it's great for Binance, it's not so great for Ethereum. So that's definitely a negative. And we can see that people are slowly starting to lose a lot of that faith that they had in Ethereum, and looking more at projects like Binance because of the efforts that they are putting forward. So my verdict, after saying all that, I think it is a buy. I do think Ethereum is a buy. I think the price is absolutely depressed due to the current altcoin bear market. I think we're trading at $190 right now. And I just think it's too cheap. I think it's certainly too cheap, especially with Ethereum 2.0 coming up. Honestly, what happens most of the time what happens is people will look into the current news and they'll forget to look at what's going to happen 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out. And while Ethereum is famous for delays, and having another delay would be absolutely tragic, and it would really damage my faith in Ethereum if there was another one, I do have faith for now that Ethereum 2.0 is going to be coming out in 2020 in the first half, and that is really going to bring a lot of that market share back. And so right now what we have is this depressed price action, but in 6 months, that might not be the case. In 6 months, we might have Ethereum 2.0 and all of this hype might start again. We might have another altcoin bull run. So we might have all of these other things that are contributing to Ethereum. Now, I'm not saying we need an altcoin bull run to bail us out of our Ethereum positions, because I think you can say that about any altcoin. You can say, well, I'm just going to hold my Cardano because we're going to have an altcoin bull run. However, I think it's doubly important if crypto does start making a resurgence, it's going to be doubly important for Ethereum because people are going to be running ICOs again. If people run ICOs again, then you're going to start getting this constricting supply effect on Ethereum. As of right now, there is no constricted supply. Everyone is bearish on this asset. Most people are shorting it, and the price is depressed. The dev supremacy means that there's more dev time on Ethereum compared to others. So you can kind of look at this as... So video games, here's a good example. A video game, what you can do is you can pay beta testers to put in hundreds of hours to beta test your game, but none of that is really equivalent to actual tests in the field. Once you release your game and it's live, you have literally millions of players putting in millions and millions of hours on your game, and that is going to be so much more time than anything you could pay your beta testers to do, because now it's a global thing. And so I look at Ethereum as the same way, where there are developers on Ethereum all over the world who are contributing so many man hours, so much time in this decentralized fashion, that Ethereum as a platform and as an infrastructure is gaining all of these benefits without having to do very much at all from a core ETH Foundation perspective. So I think that's a very great thing that people aren't really thinking too much about. All the historically successful dApps and games have been on Ethereum. I see no reason why this is going to change. People love building on Ethereum. It's easy. This is going to continue into the future. And I think despite the bear market, we have seen that people continue to develop on Ethereum. Maybe the ICOs have gone away, but people are still interested in developing for this thing. We see that developers are still wanting to build on this. I know a few Ethereum maximalists who are still Ethereum maximalists. You wouldn't expect that to happen after the 90% drop we've had, or 95% drop we've had, but we still have Ethereum maximalists. So that says a lot about Ethereum. You have some good community bag holders. Now, on the negative side, there is a large amount of those. There's a large amount of bag holders who bought from $1,400, $1,000, $800, and they're looking to sell. They're looking to get out. They're beleaguered investors. So you have a lot of overhead resistance that you need to keep in mind. And the other negative is that it's difficult for you as an investor, I mentioned this earlier, to put in $1,000 and then in Ethereum and then hope to have $10,000 in 6 months or in a year. It's hard to say because it's a lot harder for Ethereum to do than for a much smaller market cap coin because of that market cap size. It's $20 billion valuation now. If you want a 10x, you're looking at $200 billion, and actually it has to go even higher than that because of the way proof of stake works. So the inflation, actually even proof of work means that there's lots of inflation. And then finally, the final negative is that there's a lot of competitors on the sidelines, which makes me not fully bullish on this asset in the long term. So in general, my verdict is I am bullish on it long term, but I'm not fully bullish on it long term. I think it's a buy. I think it's a hold. I think if you are bullish on crypto, you definitely want to have some Ethereum in your portfolio. It's important you have some, but I would say maybe have a 5 to 10% of your total portfolio in Ethereum currently. And as we see Ethereum come out with things like Ethereum 2.0, we see competitors kind of fall by the wayside. We see the delays not happen. We see the team starting to actually execute. You can slowly start increasing that position to maybe 15, 20, 25%. But for now, I am decently bullish on the long term. In the short term, it's hard to say, but in the medium and long term, I'm definitely bullish on Ethereum. But I would not go, it's not something that I would go all in and just completely put all of my money and sink all of it into it. So that was my Ethereum review. I hope you guys liked it. I worked pretty damn hard on that one, getting all the information together, but let me know what you guys think. I am actually curious on this one, so leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Ethereum in general. Are you bullish on it? Are you bearish on it? If you're bearish on it, why? And if you're bullish on it, let me know why. We know a lot of technical traders are super bearish on this thing, so I always love proving those guys wrong. But yeah, like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys next time.